Good afternoon, America, New England, Connecticut, Weathersfield. My name I've been lied about. A whole bunch of different arrests, a whole bunch of different falsified news articles. And I stayed calm every time. One time, so I first, me and others have, since we were little, everyone too, many ways, even though people deny it. We have prevented free speech by people involved with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and exploitation of it. Each year, increasingly, it's mixed, juxtaposed with the names of people we know and people, in other words, we think we know too. In other words, I don't mean like that about how it is. Like I mean how it is by a method. I'm not speaking about anyone's motivations because people are, where they understand is only through live progressions. For example, where black and white treatments, opinions, convictions themselves hold evidences that things that are hyper evidential. People are offensively motivated to keep that from being discerned by keeping the fights about racism rather than about the actual predicate acts and the actual and criminal insidiousness towards those black and white treatments relative to forsaken logistical impositions upon Americans sickly distinctly, yet per the breaching methods uses of color, then and per the breaching methods uses of color now, inseparable from that which is offensively pretending other multi-front and preventing the simultaneous from being spoken by preventing simple sentences and actual acts from being spoken. They and then pretend we make conspiracy theories, a whole bunch of other countries and us at the same time. Both political parties are already made up of constituencies that were our victim predators that had other replaced with what then other told to them then our founders had us um, left us to tell for themselves who had words forced. So that is positive that we could discern that's what they were showing us. In other words, nature, it's positive nature showing us negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures are caused by roles with things, with those crazy laws that the breaching method employed for a long term, knowing that nature will continue to demonstrate its presence, that of a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. So understand, little rap guy and friends, there's a devil, there's a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise that is being, that as the devil, not a ghost, not something written by some guy with a poem and rolls with criminally foreign influence database relationships and science is abridged self-value. England doesn't even remember its history. So here we use what is true always and not denying exceptions, not denying exception nature, not valuing exceptions and exception nature being or having been denied. So when people make economic oriented opinions and convictions, they left out the breaching method rolls with the breaching method, including known recorded ones, how countries are grouped, defenses of pseudo stability, pseudo integrity. It is recorded, hyper evidential, relevant. I mean, related to for example, the logistical impositions again, sickly distinctly upon all identity ground locations. That's what our founding parents wanted us, need us to know. And so it is even easier to discern where and how those locations longest and most sickly having been worse than forsaken, while other was and is pretended and all means to get away with it was handed to it. So we have strong men and women because nature made you strong. And so more and more pseudo strength, used for the identities of locations, defending the identity of the location as humanity, With that, those identity locations are theater. See, the identity grounds tactically denatured. Someone who justifies where and how people stacked vertically and horizontally by all kinds of fact, human nature, illnesses. I'm not a doctor, also recorded. Are there rules to counter them as fact cheating? They're involved with identity thefts and frauds with courts at the same time, though. So we have to get them on paper. Otherwise, they say, oh, we don't want people to be nervous to go to doctors. That's where we have to get the fake doctors out. The doctors with their family members on the campuses through time involved with identity thefts and frauds. Then they want to have those kids now as adults pretend their motivations from the past where they have fake locations involved with it. They can't be honest about their motivations. Those are connections between people with the interbranch, all exception nature tied to them. I mean, their influences over things that have nothing to do with them. Just their roles with people that work next to the spots everywhere and as those spots. They're keeping instances, they're keeping shock and awe, real or made up, with the people, for example, that with the officers, all the police forms or whatever, and the people standing there shock and awe after a little kid just died at a Harvard school of fentanyl, as they reported. Now, these news companies were already with their investigators prior to the interbranch retired and standing, all exceptions and the exception nature tied to them, to having been fabricating audio and video as wire predicate acts with news stories and with the interbranch sources too, as ones too, so needing us to say that even though it's recorded, and they need to because they have methods to pretend to, because they're worse, using and having used them and that remotely as victim predators, though. So we have to show how remotely a whole bunch of natures of fact treatment nature oriented motivations, natures, needs, interests of strangers are effectively being and having been motivated to collude with against each individual of New York City, of each location, let alone the ones in New York City where it's distinctly easier to discern there. See, nature will give us not how to make positive out of negative, because while it's showing us, it shows us the difference between how criminal insidiousness nature makes positive out of negative syntactically. This is about the electrical engineering of our human fact nature, our syntax. This is hyper-linguistics. Linguistics and defenses of itself and sensibilities, and defenses of premises treatment, of nature treatments that can't defend itself and afford to discern simple things that are hyper-evidential about nature. So it needs all of the sciences need individually grouped and together to value shared physical delusions in their grounding, like with agreed uses of words/values like the environment, energies, neutralities, victory, rises/raises omega, neutrality, and neutrality's mother, energies. M-E, neutrality, relative to the identity of hyper-simultaneous. That has three simultaneous identities of positive. That where and how, when they're not simultaneously positive to themselves, that is relevant to where and how we are automatically temporary positive. But how so? Like a switch with the electrical engineering. of our nature's nature. Nature. In other words, of humanity's science as it actually is manifest. We are criminal insidiousness nature. Can't legalize that. But it was legalized. It was those laws were employed. Linguistic, manifest, roles with the hyper manifest, exploiting where and how the short words and revelations of the ancients, and then further of our founders, distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously with their identity theft and fraud, and the ancients representing and having represented the republic for which we stand, which has not been represented since semi-ancient times. Because they can't afford to discern what English and how English was used. All that is actually the significance of why and how the predicate is named the predicate as English. And the predicate act is named the predicate act as the law. So, well, for example, the news media locations, and I'm not, and you guys are trying to make it look like it's personal. And in other words, because you guys are being coached by the people who answer the phones for you. It's a database-oriented method. Has to quote, has people through the whole careers since they were kids. In other words, what black and white is about, mistreatments of that. Not only does it have to do with physical delusions, it has to do with criminally foreign influence, fact-cheating nature. It has to do with criminally foreign influence, fact-cheating nature qualities and aspects relevant, and premises treatments, and how defenses of that had got away with pretending they could speak for positive or negative or neutrality properly. So they are coaching presidents, they are tricking presidents to either shut up or speak what could only progress until a more explosion of war. And now it's an end. Nature has been demonstrating negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, in demonstration of this since ancient times. What is actually the archaeological evidence of the Republic? To discern it, we have to put it relative to that breaching method, the syntax, captivation, complete possession of the human linguistics systems, all tactically ulterior from the hyper-linguistic system. So the media, for example, has been getting away by pretending to be for types of rights, to pretend not to realize that where and how they are consciously roles with the Constitution abridged, and with the breaching method having weaponized that, and roles with the colonies individually grouped and together, with that which has their own histories, criminally foreign influence and self-value used remotely the same way. They were our roles with that against each other. And then now our own and their own against ourselves, and how grouped. So, but just like instead everyone makes positives out of negatives, the way the breaching method knew they would make defenses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive new treatment and of negative treatment simultaneously, which are, I should say, positive / identity treatments, and positive / identity negative / treatment, but in collusion, criminal insidiousness to keep out the Trinity, to keep out the value, the three distinct values, the extent of the simultaneous we could discern, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that. Those are three different ways. Value as nature / nature as value only increase distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. That's when, for example, where and how the identity of relationship to itself, the hyper-simultaneous has the identity of volume. That is greater than and more finite than, while being the identity of space. It is greater than, more finite than, while being the identity of existence. It is space/existence. It is that. It is an, in other words, we can't, the yin yang is about the simultaneous/hyper-simultaneous. I did not read this. See suits and ties. See their counters. See sense and sensibilities regarding the significance of that, the value of it, of identities like that, of identity/is like that, all tactically apart from that which is native pure, as the Republic, that which was stole from the Native Americans, as us. And so still they are forced, as us distinctly. Sickly distinctly to keep out sickly non-distinctly, not while it was being undiscerned. Roles, needs, and natures and styles needed to keep that undiscerned. And so, for example, I don't want to use names and things like that. In other words, when they go for typewrites, they're pretending they have employed. They have child abuse method where they have little kids, and they say, "Oh, well, I need to see someone," which is true. But the reason it's true, they're in the furtherance of forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading, blame the other things, others, ourselves. And self-valuing means to get away with it per uses by themselves, and their uses of it ulterior from its own too, screening it, which actually recorded. A human fact, human nature breaching method took the history of English and criminally re-engineered it and made them self-evaluate. For example, before they were the complete possession of the sophistication, the only allowed to be remembered sophistication at North and South America before the Revolutionary War. It had sustained Native Americans A through Z to force roles with systems that are other than the one that is native pure, or the one that is and two. So that's one. No, so that's how they're, from their perspective, they were discerning syntactically, and are discerning syntactically how the hyper-simultaneous is. The hyper-simultaneous is native pure. No matter who you are, you're native pure. But now your identities of names, titles, systems, tactically ulterior from that, though. So ulterior from what can even emit a quality of fact, human nature, relative to the value of the Native Americans, short words and revelations. In other words, those differences there are only to show the quality of fact, human nature, the complete possession of that which is preventing the discernment of the hyper-linguistics, the hyper-linguistics, that is a part where we are quality of fact, human nature. That is where and how evolution's fruits and gifts come from. But through its system, through its electrical engineering as ourselves, and as the ground distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, as that which is native pure. So it wants and needs, nature itself is demonstrating. We're automatically temporary positive. It's part of where and how it demonstrates the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of the value of sequence treatments. Because before people started debating about this, they already have roles with identity thefts and frauds and illusions and narratives off campuses tied to on campuses, and simultaneously being and having been roles with private databases of all different kinds of locations, kept needing to hide and self-value the same illusions posited in relation relative to that, in the sense of therefore the sense and sensibility of the names at those locations, all here wall. See, Romulus and Remus read as ciphered / deciphered. See, the religious books read as cipher / deciphered. And we could see and discern this relative to denials of the value, significance of what is said at the first part of the Old Testament and at the first part of the Quran, and how the people are overtly crazy with religion, and we all know, and how the people formally though with religion are in collusion, also with the interbranch, also with the opinion natures of A through Z relative to an identity theft fraud method that recorded consciously effectively maintains self-value. A whole bunch of ways people know, but need to pretend not to realize. The short words and revelations that were left to be taught at each age of fact-keeping nature. They are being and having been increasingly self-value replaced through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, in the furtherance of negative value nature progressions, action natures, in the furtherance of a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. It is hyper-evidential and actually recorded, and was and is actually recorded, wherein how the lawyers were involved, fabricating off evidences, planting evidences, including how fact-keeping nature-oriented evidences planting was and is criminally done. Boxing is fun. So, and used remotely, the names and identity ground locations names further need to pretend other, per uses of pretended, in other words. This method knew that they would have to be names as titles, as identity grounds, voices that couldn't defend themselves and afford to go back and look at the years that came before, experience honestly relative to this. This is painting people to self-follow roles with individual grouped and together identity thefts and frauds, specifically designed to keep individuals from being able to report and defend themselves from identity thefts and frauds. Relative and all exception nature involved are in demonstration of the same thing. So they have people using words like value relative to, applications and like classes and things like that, treatment and syntax, where they're leaving out its role by and function by that which is hyper-simultaneous, that which is the value of the simultaneous. So an individual is a simultaneous nature, where we are value as nature / nature as value, distinctly from how we are a species identity of volume, as an extent to it of it that could see the entire body of it. I could know what a black person thinks because you guys we're the same nature, and they think, for example, that we're in a trap. Now, see, so when they're young, when we're young, and everyone's young, when we hear about the laws of what that had in place, see, they made it look like our founders had roles with that. They're replacing where and how they have all kind of manifest being and having been self-valued theater takes on positive and negative in collusion. There are uses of the shock and awe men and women with badges pretending they could speak for the law, standing outside of the campus. The person died of fentanyl. Now, they probably had nothing to do with drugs, too. There are addiction specialists, and uses of words like substance by the FBI and by Congress and by the branches of government individually grouped in together. They've been criminally foreign influence since founding. Pounding drums, because the substance of the identity theft, fraud, and slander method /S roles is what for example, the people inside that projects building in my Little Rap Guy and Friends cartoon episode. I'm going to put the link to it. I want you to think about the people in those buildings. And in other words, the breaching method that put that in place. And simultaneously the increasing value of all the different ways and motivations, natures, needs, interests, narratives of where and how they blame that on our founding parents, and where and how that is manifest, where they individually grouped and together, people at those locations, and at any location when you see pictures of New York City, where they have people stacking. Now, all exceptions in the exception nature to have where it's not bad to be people stacking. This is nice. The penthouse, you know what I mean? All that exception, that is self-value too. In other words, not to make fights with those people. See, that if they need to sequence shift, they need to pretend other things others are. They're not. The people are getting involved with people's. In other words, it's unacceptable to people stacking. And if someone tries to use that as an exception nature to pretend that it's all right, well, it's not bad being people stacked. It's really in demonstration the same thing, because it's also relevant to that tactically denatured at all locations, sickly distinctly, including the suburbs that were built involved with the database oriented, but way worse at all locations with those database locations to collusion with it from used remotely, not just the identities of the countries that were the surface claimants of the complete possession and slavery, the colonies, of the native nature we have and had as Native Americans, as colonists, and then as Americans, everyone sickly distinctly, that sustained against Native Americans through what was already sustained and maintained self-value roles, with it blamed on other things, others, and or on selves. England, its roles with the possession. Now, even when they were blaming on themselves correctly, their possession and their real known roles with the possession of Connecticut, and with its other colonies and the colonies from other countries, they were effectively used to keep maintained. Worse than extortion and slavery over the identities of volume at all locations, areas, and state, individually grouped and together. The value of the identity, the value and the value progression as identity, the way it is per the science, that the breaching method set, tricked, hurt, forced, persuaded, self-value. In other words, by maintaining fact-cheap nature defenses of physical needs and other needs to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidious natures, wrongdoers, murders, mass murder, mass hurt, mass, even then the counters to it in collusion, specifically for the fact, human nature oriented possession of the things. In other words, so and how they speak through others, offensively bringing people that approach people as dishonest people who and that we don't even know. And some, we know their names for, who's going to remember their names. Others we know. In other words, I was watching because I minded my business growing up. Because, in other words, there was an identity theft fraud method that I learned more and more about because people keep speaking into it and using it. And how that was used is relevant because it was used in the World Trade Center attack in Washington, D.C., too, before that. And then in the World Trade Center attack in the Ninth Circuit Court, and with people associated with the World Trade Center building right next to the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, those buildings right before the attack, as people that brought that up in confessions. People would bring up locations and confessions to me relative to and as their roles with various natures of federal criminals before they got caught, and some of them as the co-defendants of former director of the FBI, where those individuals and their neighbors had roles with federal crimes, with people with databases that were forced to roles with it as kids when I was a kid, and as roles with falsified police reports, stacking fake. There were courts and judges. I only knew about one court. No, I found, in other words, I found out more. There were courts and judges involved with their family members and fire departments. There are fire departments and people, all kinds of different ways. People involved with insurance companies, people involved with investigators with that, people involved with addiction specialists and police forms associated with that, with no uses of words like substance. So they're involved with an identity theft fraud method through time. On along Route 3, people have connections to the locations in downtown Hartford next to the Capitol, and how they use corners of streets, routes, and things like that, and features of such, and parks. Central Connecticut State University's identity, where it speaks through others, it recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are a whole bunch. There are Mark Carone, Kevin Carone, Jamie Carone, involved with federal crimes and identity theft frauds, men and women. And I don't even know them. And they don't know that what I'm talking about. If they do, it's only through needs to hide roles with it. And it's identity theft fraud slander roles. And with the people on and off the locations next to the state capitol, on and off involved with remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of journalists from on and off their campuses and criminally foreign influence, involved with identity thefts and frauds, illusions too. They paint fake illusion. There are people forging and switching names of courts, and there were people child abused. They per themselves and per others at a religious location when they were kids. But it was more so the involvements with it at the religious locations, including Jewish locations involved, and the differences between the fake, and the differences between the religious spots. There are uses of religion where and how we have people involved with identity thefts and frauds and how they've been getting away with it, and how, in other words, how they've been keeping science from revealing the answers that we have that are most practical and most probable and most sane, because they are simultaneously, formally, originally, still they have roles of criminally foreign influence, facts and data reception, sequence value reception, simultaneous values reception, racketeering worse than war crimes. Identity theft, fraud, slanders worse than war crimes roles. And that's what it sounds like where and how. individually grouped and together. Countries would defended positive and negative treatments of the archaeological artifacts that were criminally foreign influenced, self-valuing having been, because that's all they were capable of being. So they have a crime method that has their kids interbranch and the criminal enterprises, including where and how they have juxtaposed police forms in their acting coaches. Personally involved too with uses of corners of streets to hide their life progressions, identity theft, frauds, instances, roles. Oh, I heard this. Oh, yeah, I saw it. I was at the thing. Frankie Reese is involved with people with the intelligence community leading up to the World Trade Center attack and with Wethersfield police and various natures of courts, a whole bunch of other different nations, for example. Just as an old woman involved with the intelligence community, I don't know her. Then she wanted to make her opinion wherever in the background, play games. See, but these are people involved. She's involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin's co-defendants and their family members with child abuses and other natures of organized crime acts leading up to in various cases. Their roles with uses of depositions to paint people to fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people, and to slander people. In other words, and where and how they have remote uses of the criminal pretended other, but they pretend they have integrity, the people who speak for the law, formally and informally as lawyers, privately and other. Just opinion natures A through Z, you're speaking about the law. You're speaking about the hyper-simultaneous. You're speaking about the value of hyper-linguistics, for example. Hyper-simultaneous is where and how the individual is a distinct simultaneous nature. Being grouped is being like areas, ages, sexes. That's a distinct simultaneous nature. Being the species body of volume, that's distinctly how we are volume as nature, value as nature / nature's value, as increasing value / value progression. So there are people, they already had the whole careers of people with the types of police forms, the types of court forms, and where the narratives in everyone's names is in collusion with that lie progression. Everyone to collusion, or they just attach you to fake words, fake locations, and they exploit that at other locations. So there are people involved with the military who had roles like identity thefts and frauds instances real fast when I was a kid. And see, with complete strangers too, as people involved with forensics locations, also with the multi-front crimes and motivations and name stacking roles with the news media and with their their crime acts and their methods juxtaposed. And as their sources roles, they've been using interbranch locations to fabricate audio into video as collusion with what they've been roles with, influence from off campuses, and already haven't been influenced from off campuses, on off campuses, motivations, natures, needs, interests, other, in collusion with that. And then needing to hide that from, showing needs to hide that from correlation natures actually inherent active and progressive means within us people by uses of locations. Like there's a park near my house, Millwoods Park, has people from Central Connecticut State University involved with identity thefts and frauds and slanders. So they tried to maybe film it. They tried to film an exception with a Danielle Perron, and with men that said that they all behind her back. A Mark Violet. He's also one of the ones with black and white families on with the locations next to Trinity College and next to CCSU, involved with them with people on off the state judicial branch. I mean, state judicial branch of it, and on off the state prison offices, but next to Trinity College, or in other words, next to Trinity College. Is and was roles with a whole bunch of other countries and next to other colleges with the military and with like pilots, their family members, where they will make timed identity thefts and frauds roles and uses of them, and where and how they have roles with the Weathersfield police families, Weathersfield Police Department, families that answer the phones for them. They even have their clicks call in fake things timed. So they've been stacking fake words, fabricating audio and video to replace what's actually recorded audio and video through time. So they have a patina brown that also Eric Oliveri said, and others said they involved. That was a house near the corner of Fairlane Drive and Griswold Street, and the house across the street from them is also involved with people that had girls that they told lies about to me and to my family as dang thefts and frauds that I never had conversations with, as people involved with switching and forging names and predicate acts at Trinity College with the Joshua Stryker. Also timed intercities roles with the principal child abusers campus and with a Joshua Julian. Also with various roles with the police forms and even military police switching and forging names. Also black and white themed, KKK hate group themed, as the little fakes that from in the background with girls I never had a conversation with, whenever saw them around campuses that they married or whatever, and they have their kids involved with this. There's a Subby Bajerio involved with this, with like, in other words, he was involved with identity thefts and fraud. Some people that with the name Posse too, to make it look like they're going out after things. He was planting evidences with judges and some, I found out all kinds of foreign and domestic medical families and people involved with the prisons, and they confessed, people with Middletown involved with child prisons, involved, people made quick all these confessions and demonstrations to me. In other words, Subby Bajerio lied growing up and was involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders to men and women that associate with Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, intercities involved with campuses with identity thefts and frauds and slanders, and relative to their uses of what their motions are regarding what they perceive, because it's also fake things. And where it's real, what's actually recorded is a demonstration of the same thing. In other words, they can't pretend what they did on paper. So they've been trying to make fake exceptions, putting charges with no writing, coupling the charges with exceptions, with confessions too. Uses of confessions are distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously at all locations relevant to where and how the identity of science actually manifests as the hyper-simultaneous. In other words, our hyper-linguistics, how we are hyper-linguistically actually manifest. So they have the sense and sensibilities of people pretending that they're pretending about their emotions and passions regarding needs for people to be able to report lies against themselves, and methods against themselves. There are methods, plural, and they are bound against yourselves, people of New York City. It is against all locations if we're discerning that correctly. While we start discerning it correctly, we simultaneously start seeing all the constituencies and then individually grouped together, the parties and the exceptions, all fake integrity, roles with criminally remotely used, all exception nature tied to the three branches of government and themselves, self-value being and having been in the complete possession. Fact achievement base. Campus Marcius rises in the east. No, so I teach you right and loan. I tell you true. Whoa, fake branches fall. So Weathersfield, Connecticut is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, being and having been involved, intercities, Connecticut, at the same locations and around the corner from them. Like where the witch trials place in Weathersfield, Connecticut is. It's right around the corner from where George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, where he had to further his counter extortion uh, that he had to enable to win the last battle of the Revolutionary War against the surface value of England, of the name of England. Now, see, that made England going to be attacked by what the breaching method had set up, sickly distinctly against them and sickly distinctly against America, against the Native Americans. That's really what did it. We have to get the whole complete thing correctly, or it's nature's going to keep demonstrating it. And see, that's going to keep being self-valued, having been demonstrated by the roles that exploit, all that to the identity thefts and frauds. So I don't know the name of the person. There was a young kid. He was hanging around with it. So now he's in a grade 2, 3 grades below me, associated with Lenny Trigger. And this is where the intelligence community, interbranch and private, are criminally foreign influence. He has roles with an identity theft fraud. His narrative was about a remote control car. He's also roles with people at Chuck Casper. I never had, he's non-verbally confirmed to me, roles of identity thefts and frauds with people intercities connected with O'Brien family and with our former Mayor Gold and with the locations next to the state capitol, involved with houses on my street where the O'Brien family, like there's a house across the street from them where an O'Brien family and a Collusion family made confessions and demonstrations relevant to confessions and demonstration of Wethersfield police over the phones and with the Wethersfield town offices. It's also relevant to their roles with Afghanistan countries involved with drugs and medicines crimes with them and identity thefts and frauds, acts and methods with them. In other words, too, how they're using exceptions and exception nature. Like, in other words, where and how they could use the word black. In other words, they can't defend themselves because they are shock and awe. And they are screening it. And they are keeping that blame to other things, others themselves, because they were remotely used as victims since they were kids with what you guys are preventing me from countering and with others. Because you've been planting evidences with people that have been associated with the schools through years. Not, in other words, not just the interbranch and the private tied to them, all the pain and the overt criminal enterprises recorded how kept needed to hide the same sequence shifts, final acts, progressive lies as roles with instances on and off campuses coordinated. So I do not know Lenny Trigger. He sought me out then, and then others he was confirmed is involved with people, with the person next to him then, a young kid, involved with people from Old Saybrook and from other shoreline communities, involved with some people involved with car dealerships too, and military, and Navy and Marines, and other natures of military, other natures of people that run prisons and things like that. And those are roles with doctors who have physical delusions and criminally foreign influence natures of drugs and medicines crimes, and other natures of crime roles with their patients and criminals before they got caught, and against innocent people, and against their patients and criminals to keep them shut up about certain things, and to keep them, a remotely controlled use distinctly from how they're all being used, remotely controlled, including the sick natures interbranch, pretending they could speak for what's legal, who's criminal, who's not. They've been doing way worse. And see, they've been doing that because way worse have been done to them since they were little kids. So Paul Manafort is one of the names involved with Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, with a CNN story on Paul Manafort Drive. involved with uses of their Facebook pages, of CNN, and of New Britain Superior Court, and of other courts involved with federal crimes and cases with other countries since they were kids. Also, because their roles with the databases at the schools they went to. So there are proofs that the child abuse is reported of the kids through time with the church that also had roles with where and how the interbranch and the exceptions tied to them. In other words, all these jobs and things like that. I don't know Nick Sweet. It's also how they have them invested with their kids, pretending other. And then they had to pretend other. In other words, they made an exception years ago. And then they involved his daughters and all her friends with soccer teams and stuff like that with identity thefts and frauds. Same thing as Scalora family did with the judges and prosecutors. Same thing with their extended family members. Same thing with the Mayor Debbie Gold. And there's a Lee Gold also reportedly involved with this, and Debbie Gold involved with this. Lenny Triglia. And I don't know the names of all the family members involved with it. I think it's someone involved with a restaurant, a wife of his in a restaurant. But you see, these people are supposed to use my name. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders that are also in the form of falsified police reports, roles, and child abuses with a principal child abusers campus and other campuses simultaneously involved with it, and their uses of locations next to it. There are houses at the corners of Highcrest Street and people tied to them and their neighbors. They also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, had my name used with them specifically for identity thefts and frauds rules and slander rules. And as people that pretended to know me and with their family members, with their patients and criminals, in other words, with their doctors and with the judges and doctors fabricating audio and video together, and with people with the fire departments. So they want and need that to pretend it's personal for me because I didn't respond. In other words, that was the second time I was at Harvard Hospital. 3 times they forced me for a mental evaluation. In the course of them preventing me first, calm means to defend myself with fact, human nature. And so then I had to raise my voice and force people to call the police without telling them how, because I knew they would have to record themselves, fake, because that's what they are. So there are also neighbors of where he lives now or where he used to live, Lenny Triglia on Hangdog Lane, that I don't know the names of, associated with Maria Vizino and her neighbors. There's a Brian Bonin who also sought me out after, I don't know, he had something to do. He sought me out. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, put me in fake locations, fake ties to him, fake natures of ties to him, and roles of wire crimes and drugs and medicines crimes with people on Route 3. And, I partially connected that, but then he confirmed it afterwards without me having said that. He has roles with people associated with arts that would hang out with the Arch Pizza and with places along Route 3 that have roles with some foreign and domestic military identity theft fraud cliques involved with campuses I went to, where they went out of their way to say that they were involved, they were involved with putting fake things in records. And, as their roles with identity thefts and frauds with other countries, they have roles with police forms with Korea, associated with a whole bunch of different ways. Only the extent of it is, to an extent, it's not debatable. And so that's how one of the ways, when they want to debate, they have to do it on paper. They're pretending people have conspiracy theories. They're pretending I had conspiracy theories. They're pretending I had a conversation with doctors. I had no conversation with doctors the whole time. I didn't want to talk to them. I was there for 3 days and part of the night. So 2 days, a day extra, or 2 days extra, in other words. because the second day I just I don't know. No, but I didn't communicate with. I remember the guy. They made you sleep in this thing, and then they force you onto a different part of of the campus of Harvard Hospital, with the Institute living on the campus of Harvard Hospital, involved with slavery in North America, instituted in 1822. See, that was after the Revolutionary War, no. And slavery was still entrenched north and south, still entrenched in New York City, sickly distinctly from how in the South, no, and sickly worse. And know how the fact-cheaping nature would be sickly worse. So relevant to where and how you're gonna have motivations as black actors to play the roles of of the South with passions and emotions against the North, because the North is a sick face too. Our founders had to counter extort everyone to force them to get Constitution unabridged up there, but you guys are too fake, pretending other simultaneously. CT break. Attend. I'll call you home again. So there's a female officer named Sullivan that Wethersfield male officers recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They were switching names with her, and other officers have been doing that and using her identity as a woman and uses of the identities of their kids to hide life aggressions, to be in gain sense and sensibilities, in collusion with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Time sequence shifts. Worse than they're hurting the educations of kids. And they're pretending we have a conspiracy theories on a mass level. They have you saying it right and they're interpreting it wrong. And or when you say it right, I mean, in other words, when you say it wrong, but they know you have to say things. In other words, when you want to hear the women and men trying to defend their kids from the people with the theory, uses of theory, CRT, how they have critical race theory, how that is relevant and rolls with community resources training, location in East Hartford, criminally foreign influence, roles leading up to and in the World Trade Center attack, leading up to and in cases in Washington, D.C., and in the Ninth Circuit Court, and next to the World Trade Center and other Ninth Circuit courts, how they are manifest as identity law with the audacity to defend themselves when such hyper evidential as that standing in New York City as it is actually standing. We must use as value to discern the way. So in other words, they pretend, and then they have, for example, Drew Barrymore. You are a strong woman. You are a good woman. You want to make everyone feel comfortable. And so everyone around you. And so, like, for example, you did a story. There was a story about there are places that deal with people who have problems with addiction. Now, their patients and their criminals, their weaknesses and their strengths haven't been involved with identity theft and fraud, falsifying, offensively preventing people from demonstrating child abusers involved with medical racketeering with kids, fake integrity. It's all right if you guys need people to help you. When we need people for help us fact cheaping nature oriented, there's no one there, and there's a bunch of sick fake punks, and the people associated with them, forcing their opinions about things they don't even know, offensively on people, and painting themselves narratives with the interbranch involved with what's the problem at the locations. They can't judge what they have criminally involvements with at the locations, themselves and their family members personally. Per the method, too, it's however you want. Boxing is fun. A species body. Win. We cannot lose. So we need real integrity. Speaking for the law. Speaking for the value of going by what is actually simultaneous. going actually by what is actually its identity of relationship to itself, the value of that which is hyper-simultaneous. And going by the value of that and how they distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously are value, progression, perfect. That could be temporary, positive as negative, is increasingly relevant. Heaven and hell are scientific values manifest as our forever natures, positive or negative identity of relationship to the value progression system perfect, where it makes more and more forever nature that is also positive onto, and as its complete possession over space/existence, making more and more of its identity of volume. That simultaneously comes with the increased value of its identity of volume, the identity of relationship to itself, and the value of it here too, distinctly at Earth, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously in relationship to the rest of space/existence, part of what demonstrates further and more finite at the same time, while as how that as space it is two identities of sequence/simultaneous nature that won't mix with space/existence. And because of where and how, it is one identity of volume that only increases. And so Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space/existence being more so, while being that, our identity of relationship to the hyper-simultaneous, that identity of simultaneous, that every difference is simultaneously, the difference of the species body individual and the species of the individual. Only the individual can deal with the finite and speak for the finite. Groups, even couples, can't. So this is a method that understood this, and forced, tricks, hurt, persuaded. Obfuscations of Adam and Eve, or Alpha and Omega, are exceptions in exception nature, relevant to where and how yin yang are one body, while two simultaneously. Alpha and Omega are two bodies, and they are one body, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, from how they are as yin yang, because the hyper invisible is the subject of languages, of language/s, of all parts of your body. The electrical engineering of what is actually hyper-simultaneous is inseparable. The value of it is inseparable from all subject treatments individually grouped and together. It is the identity of relativity, relevant to and as a scientific value that is increasingly existent, increasingly valuable to discern. See, but we have integrities of the law, names of the law, names of titles of law and stuff like that, still bridged. So they have to self-value means inherited for them. Means handed to them by the breaching method, to then need to hide that too. In other words, why and how there are problems at borders is why and how we're not appreciating why and how the cell nucleus, the cell body, and cell wall/S is in demonstration of the body of value, hyper-simultaneous, invisible but still discernible, hyper-invisible but still discernible. The invisible but still discernible comes with the hyper-visible but still discernible. And it is three identities of invisible but still discernible, distinct. And it is three identities of hyper-invisible but still discernible, but distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And it is two identities of sequence/simultaneous nature further. There are proofs that the ancients had microscopes and that they taught and understood how one identity of forever nature is 1/3/5 identities of sequence/simultaneous nature coming through and as the value of the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, and two identities of sequence/simultaneous nature as the same identity of volume. An identity is a nature as volume that has a relationship to positive and negative simultaneously. And positive and negative itself is three-dimensional. When all parts of itself, when all parts of its volume are not positive to itself, but are still used as a positive, where we are fact-treatment nature, that's a criminal insidiousness nature of positive treatment. We know that criminal insidiousness natures of negative treatments exist. Negative, like predicate acts, criminal insidiousness natures. Criminal foreign influence. Criminal foreign influences to counter them does not mean we have to counter others' names, because we are in the same ancient trap. That ancient trap knew that we would have to counter as fact-treatment nature that came through campuses that would only have manifest people that can't counter the real causes of negative value nature progression action nature uses of standing criminal and ceaseless natures of positive and negative treatments originally and still at all locations. So we cannot separate how guilty the nations grouped are too. As victim predators, though. It's easier to do it that way. And they'll admit it. We just have to set it up for them. The nuclear nations want and need to admit it. They won't have a choice. We play this game. We just give them the means to know that they're going to have, that they're going to be safe. That requires admitting and understanding that and how we're on a tactically denatured base. From Russia to here, China. If we can get Russia, America, and China to agree to a method that will cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and nature everywhere in Russia, China, and America at once. The way we'll do it, if we're doing it, the only way it will work anyway, it's going to make every country love it everywhere at once too. We have to be led by everywhere at once anyway, because the nature is already everywhere at once, greater than it and more finite than it, while as it distinctly. So we could find the answer. It's just like having a calculator. How the hyper invisible but still discernible is. So I don't know. Lenny Triglia sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. I'm sorry, Lenny Triglia. You were influenced, or I'm sorry. I'm not. I have no feelings about it. And I need the names of your neighbor and that kid that you came here with, because it was also brought up. There was a whole bunch of uses of it, and so there's a Mike Daly and a Chet Casper also involved with the people next to the state capitol, as the ones involved with the World Trade Center with this, and with your neighbors involved with Maria Fazzino, Stephen Stocco, involved with drugs and medicines crimes with courts, people on off the state judicial branch offices, simultaneously delusions wrought too. So they have natures that need to be countered calmly, but they are preventing it by forging and switching names and roles, fabricating information into databases, interbranch and at their locations, and with people on my street and tied to them. Forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to roles too. I never had a conversation. I have nothing to do with the people across the street from the O'Briens. No. So they had something where they used my name criminally with the people with the corners of the principal child abuser street and on Hangdog Lane and other corners. They have the corner of Town Line Drive and Solstein Highway involved with the people with the buildings next to the Fox Connecticut News, like the church, involved with courts and people who were child abused that were also involved with with identity thefts and frauds, racketeering, with jobs placements that are criminally foreign and influence uses of the DMV databases of the Department of Motor Vehicles databases of the state police rolls with their databases and their locations along the Brown Turnpike. Their rolls intercities with Wethersfield, for example, with the school placements that are involved intercampuses kept vertically and horizontally, identity theft, frauds, moles, and then uses of that. Because this is what kept and keeps each age of fact, human nature, increasingly needing to self-value the real causes of why and how our founding parents wanted and need us to, had no free speech, blamed the other things, others, ourselves. The real causes of why they fought for the Constitution, blamed the other things, others, ourselves. Oh, for this class, you guys tell us what led up to the Tea Party. They're measuring, maintaining that no one understands. We're up to the Boston Tea Party. Was that method behind Marbury versus Madison? And really what put up saying get the Constitution unabridged. Unabridged relative to criminal foreign influences. One can't teach the youngest kids about anything correctly without using the phrase criminally foreign influence or criminal insidiousness, and relative to positive and negative treatments, relative to identity treatments. We have fake care with passion and emotions towards religion per identity thefts and frauds rules with the identity laws involved here. Here! Then they have the guys to go up and stand and speak before people after they die. A lie. That's the only time they could pretend they have integrity. It's the only time they could value and get away with lying to themselves about how they should shut up or they should speak long. Why spend this much time? Follow mandated law. Watch like that. The answers come. Vaccines fun. Russians and Americans would how many Russians and Americans want to get the men and women involved with the substances treatments as fact treatment nature? In other words, it's not really the drugs. Drugs, in other words, it's the fact treatment nature racketeering of juxtaposed natures, replacing the short words, replacing the actual value treatments and the actual causes of the value treatments, knave, and the actual causes of what they call resources on and off the campuses of each age and nature, and the uses of them progressively, and the differences. They're obfuscating how at each age of fact treatment nature, they're preventing us short words, true. Offensively pretending passionate emotions, how getting away with it. They don't care about gay rights. They're using those people as slavery. No one wants to fight with a gay person if you're a straight person. As a stranger too. They have those different clubs next to the state capitol. It's not just naturally. People, you find out, all of a sudden you walked into a gay party, you're like that. That's because of the extent of the identity theft fraud since we were in grammar school. They're spreading lies against little girls and against little boys sickly distinctly for their kids, used remotely by a criminally foreign influence, pretending passionate emotions, timed with criminally foreign influence, more insidious adults roles with it, and uses of it, other juxtaposed. They're not legitimately writing stuff down. TMZ, please be a man. Don't leave. You guys are playing punk. You guys are using. Then we have to beg, little Drew Barrymore, and these. I don't even know what network it is. Nothing personal network. You guys are all recorded victim predator reactions. Only having known this, and because of the roles of the databases, only say it's complete juxtaposed a whole bunch of natures of distinct or natures of organized crime, worse than war crime things, in fact, cheap nature-oriented things, all normalized, self-valued, rolls with it. That's what colonization is about. So that people want to describe it as shock and awe. So they say, oh, it's genocide. It was worse than genocide because they were employing Native Americans against Native Americans, colonists against colonists, spilling over in the colonists against Native Americans, while Native Americans against Native Americans, while colonists against colonists. Counter-extortion. Marbury versus Madison's plan. Constitution unabridged. No one lets it live. So a whole bunch of people associated with Fred Grisey is involved with the 3 spots at the end of the Brown Turnpike before the heart of Hartford and along those routes to the heart of Hartford. And at the spots at the heart of Hartford involved with identity thefts and frauds since founding, pounding drums. And thank God, though, in other words, they're all, no one could speak for positive, honestly. But thank God, in other words, J.P. Morgan, he had to borrow money from J.P. Morgan, who's buried in that hospital, in that cemetery right there, to fight the world wars. And thank God, too, that there was an identity in Germany that would fight for the individual identity of Germany. It was the states, locations, areas criminally foreign influenced that forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded uses of the bodies of Jewish people, of the physical syntax with Jewish, as simultaneously roles keeping blamed on other things, others, ourselves, while the value of the simultaneous is being prevented, which actually simultaneous. Why we are individual, group, species, body of volume. So you have punk, trick, fake motivations, nature's needs, interests, and they have that involved. They have religious locations involved with the people interbranch and criminal enterprises in a whole bunch of other countries. Kept demonstrating, confessing. I forgot his name, but there were a whole bunch of people from our country involved with some Korean Taekwondo places. This is against the people that are involved with your fake justice in your country's Korea, and psychology's physical delusions against you, criminally foreign influence with a whole bunch of other countries. They have drugs and medicines crimes with your courts. And as doctors of mental health and of addiction, they have roles with drugs, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and with a hyper criminal enterprise. I'm not a lawyer, not a police form. This is great, worse than war crime. Caught! So we just need them to get them from the sequence shifts. We need to get our sides. And we have the other sides not treat us as a side. In other words, they're fake sides. So we just have to, syntactically, we have to call ourselves America or Connecticut, but then the Connecticut and America is really not standing yet. We need to get their names onto paper. See that? So the news media, Connecticut news media, has been keeping up posted tactically, criminally foreign influence, fake information, identity theft, fraud, slander, torture rolls, identity theft, slavery rolls. But relevant, because this is how, too, sickly, non-distinctly, the locations in New York City and of Hartford, Connecticut are being also sickly, non-distinctly hurt the way all suburbs are, specifically regarding this one, Wethersfield, Connecticut, where George Washington had to leave slavery. Entrenched North and South America, entrenched here between New York and Boston. Turn! So, in other words, vaccines, I teach you things below. Each campus lost the course, the ancient force. These other ones. In other words, the Trinity alone. is relevant to where and how. Anything that is invisible but still discernible can only be used, even individually grouped together. That which is invisible but still discernible, and hyper invisible but still discernible as the languages, that could still only be used to discern the other part, two sequence / simultaneous natures. But there's only one way to do it. It sounds complicated, but it's not complicated. Just like I tell you a speech. Try to explain, okay, we're going to put these letters, and these letters are going to be words. And then, some of them are going to be verbs. And if I try to explain to you, for example, how a computer works, and we never experienced computers before, I was trying to verbally explain to you, it would sound nuts. But in other words, all this is a value / value progression. As an identity of volume, as value as nature / nature as value. And with the memory, with the ties to memory, which is positive or negative memory. Positive or negative left to identity treatments. See, people say, oh, well, I said value treatment, that's what I meant. We need to have mandated law followed. And so, New York City, Connecticut news are also roles with the sources of. They have, for example, too, they have like the departments individually grouped together. People with the communications department, with your Central Connecticut State University. Its identity speaks other. It says it wants to be other than the voices pretended it says. For example, per the uses of their kids, per the uses of the generations of their family, where and how it's the worst at all locations, where and how that kept and keeps all formal database locations, and all further and further in collusion with other to those locations, self-valued though. It's all kinds of evidence for where it is the interbranch and the exceptions tied to them. It's relevant, it's manifest where and how strangers walk up to you and ask you questions or tell you about people right before they walk up to you. And when those people are telling you don't even know them. One of the things it is commonly, sickly, distinctly against everyone is an identity theft, fraud, slander method. It is also where and how that it rolls with it and needs for it are self-valued. And how those motivations and needs for it self-valued are juxtaposed with other that is being and having been using them and that remotely. There is no sophistication that has spoken for the law. One of the ways they get away with it is pretending they don't, by getting involved with other people's business rather than having sequence truth and names forging and switching allowed countered. Now the interbranch have rolled the sources of the networks associated with the men and women who are speaking sickly distinctly. They are involved with this identity theft and fraud method that exploits the Trinity's revelations. The Trinity's hyper-evidential aspects. So they even debate the existence of it, but while they're debating is also by using and getting away with it by using physical delusions, criminally foreign influence theories that are also delusions raw of experts. And then pretending people, when they say that those experts are out of their minds, doesn't mean those experts have they pretend people make conspiracy theories. See, they made a whole bunch of knaves as countries A through Z, and then further grouped because the breaching method knew that they would defend themselves as identities, modern countries A through Z, individually grouped and together. They knew that they could get them to self-value themselves as systems tactically ulterior from the one that causes positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Simultaneously, it demonstrates negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures when that system is not being followed. So the breaching method knew it would do this with those crazy, crazy laws, and slavery juxtaposed as one of the 6 slavery laws against everybody, sickly distinctly to keep how against everyone from being self-valued as the only means to discern how it was motivated and what it was used functionally for. For example, to prevent from being discerned and utilized how syntactically, linguistically, we are actually manifest. We are actually functional. How as identities we are actually functional. You have experts making opinions about the identities of yourself since you were a kid, and they're still doing it against your kids, you parents, and they're doing it against your parents, the elderly, especially ones in elderly homes, and leading up to it, especially in New York City. That's why really bad things happen. You know how many fake integrity natures are formally needing to hide from nature itself? The proof and from correlation nature is actually inherent active progressive means relative to uses of those locations like elderly homes in New York City, relevant simultaneously to that which we're talking about with the people and the people stacking, specifically those cartoon versions or cartoon representatives of them in the Little Rap Guy and cartoons, Little Rap Guy and Friends cartoon episode. In other words, evolution science only feels like game/S. I tell best, so we have not had legal representation. In other words, is self-value being and having been pretended by victim predators. And one of the means to discern this is how they can't afford to have mandated law followed, and they simultaneously can't afford to pretend they understood people honestly. So I asked many times to fix the fake news. I'm not quoting Donald Trump because he used that phrase. The news media also confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with their sources at locations with racketeering. When they have instances and then you deal with police or then you deal with courts, especially these little kids, and that takes collusion with other little kids and overt criminal enterprise on our campuses, pretending lies and illusions and pretending their motivations were just because they were kids. And then as adults doing that from behind our backs and stuff like that, trying to make exception nature, it shows how exception nature works. Dirty jerks. So there were a phenomenon that conspired with the phenomenon of the breaching method that used also remotely, being and having been greater than and more finite than, while as the value of the former director of the FBI's fact treatments regarding how to counter criminal insidiousness at locations like at job sites and with union halls that are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved, having been with overt criminal enterprises and private ones in a whole bunch of different countries, and federal criminals and their family members associated with him, and being and having been involved with identity thefts and frauds with kids on campuses I went to, and collected uses of them then and through time. Now they have their kids involved with it, leaving out really why and how I know them, and really how and why they know too. Simultaneously, they're ones I don't know at all that they've been pretending other with, and they've been lying about their emotions and their motivations for that. With the interbranch too, doing that with passion crime roles, and with their Facebook pages, and with their recorded criminally foreign influence uses of readings of statutes with prosecutors, national interstate. For example, knowingly having had that employed with the other natures of organized crime to cover ups that they didn't, and worse than war crimes, that they never had the right to use Facebook for, and those readings of statutes. They've been preventing mandated laws, the courts, because they've been using, all these tricks they have originally and still, where they film things and make it, and then there's a syntax phenomenon. Those people pretend they know you, mixed in with the people that you don't know at all, and all their parents and things like that, and foreign and domestic adults. Each age of fact, chibi nature is measured and maintained shock and awe, victims through our own law, but that's maintained too, self-value by a breaching method that maintains those pseudo sophistication. So really what caused murders in New York City, we know part of it is recorded because we know the murders were caught, but they left out too their roles with it. Their roles with also putting innocent people in jail to hide what actually was behind murders and mass identity theft and fraud rules and mass, you know, things that people respond to as anger or as hate and leaving out the science by what is simultaneous. Emotions are about what's simultaneous. Part of how you could discern who's telling the truth relative to criminal and seditious natures of positive and negative treatment that are formal too, is by observing, how people, if they want to treat passions and emotions, they want to pick one emotion and say how its involvements with things were. People are responding or not responding to stimulus and things like that based on sequence shifts and awareness of them, awareness of self-valued roles with them. For example, the branches of government are recorded consciously communicating distinctly and non-distinctly with other countries, that they are aware that they are criminally foreign influenced and simultaneously pretending other. It's because they are differentially criminally foreign influenced, but it is increasingly, and that is being and having been perfectly increasingly used remotely anyway. You can't differentially be criminally foreign influenced. They're used remotely as standing criminal and seditious nature of positive and negative treatments, identity treatments already. And how self-value. Everyone speaking of through others since they were kids, people in the courts, recorded how shown, they have people, they trick kids to go to locations, and then they try to talk about it, it sounds like they went to a party when no one there communicated they went to a party. That's not what they would say that themselves, but it wasn't a party, it was a little rat trap. It was a criminally foreign influenced little rat trap, not just involved with child abuses, that which raised our interbranch and the overt criminal enterprises and private ones in all these other countries and collusion on off our campuses. Whole bunch of names with Central Connecticut State University recorded involved with connected a whole bunch of different identity theft frauds instances and frauds, all with ties to uses of them on my street. Now they have women reportedly had involved, and demonstrably with their doctors of their mental health and their fights with each other and fights with kids through time being and having been employed by the needs of the people that are keeping the identity thefts and frauds rules. And so I don't know rather than have me describe uses of corners and how all the strangers' names were brought up to me, respond for them. So please, and I don't know the name of Justin Kovinski's brother, or the people at the house that at the corner of the houses at the corner of the at the corners with Griswold Street involved. They were all brought up, been involved with identity theft, frauds, slanders, confessions roles. They also make confessions through strangers because they're pretending they know you then. They time where you're going to walk. It's a method that is involved with the connect, as what connects people that don't realize it connects them, as what connects depositions and cases with actually recorded predicate acts in those cases missed, illusions posited into cases, identity thefts and frauds. They're using cases and even depositions, instances that have nothing to do with people that aren't even aware that those cases and depositions go on, to have being used against identity, to put fake things in databases that are self-validated by the people that use the databases, fake identity, law, integrity natures. Needing to self-validate means to pretend other, needs to pretend other, having pretended other. So how could they follow mandated law now? They can't just stop. So Drew's News, please be strong and get me a name for the doctors recorded attaching little kids and their family members to fake all because they have roles with various natures of federal criminals personally before they were caught. They are pretending their lies and illusions were the causes of other people. For example, on and off campus is connected. This is recorded, but how it's recorded also shows simultaneously that they've been pretending others recorded. So I have to get them into paper in the interbranch locations. They've been preventing that, their names. There are various judges involved with the doctors, foreign and domestic, who've been fabricating things into databases. Various natures of drugs and medicines, crime, or even crimes with child sex offenders with the kids, other natures of child abuse with their patients and criminals had crimes with them before they got caught. So Drew Barrymore, please have a little bit of courage. It only takes a little bit of courage. Tell me the name. Who disbelieves? Give me the name of the person who disbelieves interbranch that used my name in Connecticut or in New York City, because this is people involved with the World Trade Center attack and with my people that I'm communicating with as New York City and as America and as Hartford and as Wethersfield and as the countries distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, and distinctly counter to the breaching method everyone missed. Counter not simultaneously. So it's not anything complicated. They made all come like there's a Rob Rodriguez, and as one of the ones involved with logistics places and with foreign and domestic, where they have with the courts, there's like probate court judges and their family members. They have roles with drugs, treatments, and defenses of what goes on at elderly homes, and at where they force people for mental evaluation. Where and how the people that use those mental evaluations, they were roles with the federal crimes when there were no problems. No one had a problem, and everyone was shocked when the problem came, because they were preventing people first calm speech, and then they had to hide that. So they had to stick fake things on people who have to lie about what they actually perceived about the behavior of others. So I'm sorry if I used a phrasing that hurt anybody, because they're they shouldn't bother people. In other words, but people shouldn't pretend that they're too sensitive because of someone calls someone else a name. In other words, they did way worse first, and they're calling names first. They're sequence shifting. They even have a sub-Iberian and people involved with I don't even know the names of some of them. I don't know, that knew mine through time, because they were spreading lies for the people that raised them to identities of law. Sub-Iberia involved with identity as a posse, a Longview posse, which is also involved with what used to be called Wethersfield Heights. Longview posse involved with also Scalora family, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a whole bunch of people there involved with identity theft, frauds instances, and with the courts, intercities involved with locations like East Hartford with the CRT. CRT uses by the news media, and then defenses of that, and like beating up subjects. I believe one of the women on Fox News, outnumbered, used that phrase to quote her, beating up subjects like with the Kaepernick treatments, or rising for the flag or not. See, that's used to measure and maintain roles self-valued with locations, voices, preventing individual voices and finite truths from being reported, everyone pretending other, and everyone needing to pretend for other reasons other motivations too. Kaepernick is not saying anything when he kneels. I asked Kaepernick, I asked the presidents, gave me a response. So that they have sources from on off Central Connecticut State University, also criminally foreign influence with not just the interbranch ones. They don't know themselves. They've been criminally foreign influence. They've been roles with the uses of cases, everything that came before them, even non-cases used to stack evidences with fabricated audio and video. It's relevant to where and how they effectively keep the worst predators. And in other words, that there are things associated with those worst predators that they pretend were indicators of them being predators, that they were pretending about against innocent people with way more integrity than themselves and their family members, specifically to hide remote uses of themselves and their family members as actually recorded. So another thing that ties them are our spots next to Hartford Hospital, involved through time with the names, and Weathersfield involved intercities with identity thefts and fraud, and with the people on off the state judicial branch offices next to them, and sequence shift roles with them with that, pretending they knew me years before I did with the ones that I don't know at all, etc. And like this Maria Fazina, I never saw her on campus in my life when I was in high school or any younger age. And I never hung around with her when I was in high school or any other younger age. After my class graduated, right after I was in the newspaper one time, she started making all these confessions to me regarding uses of her neighbors. Then her neighbor made a confession to me. And I don't know them. I never saw them together and stuff like that. The exception is they led me to a Brian Bonin has some people through time involved with Kevin Dillon. There's an Anna Dillon I found out too, and how she uses the name Annie Dillon and Anna Dillon, involved with some prosecutors and judges that switch names, forge names. And when they're fabricating police reports and their narratives, they do little things like that. So I'll show you. You just have to follow mandate law. Means the law really, what it really says is when someone has to report child abuses, acts, you don't pretend they made a conspiracy theory and fabricate audio and video to replace what's actually recorded. And you don't do that as natures of crimes roles and then pretend they're dealing with one type of child abuse. We're not going to separate the sexual, medical, judicial, even lawyers, how their involvements of it. Delusions raw too, while criminally foreign influence. And roles with various natures of wire crime acts and methods, including with phones and with the relevant predicate acts in the news. Note, as fake news predicate acts, offensively prevented counters per people pretending that our motivations are political. They have the political parties as victim predators pretending they have integrity when they speak on the news agencies, multi-front with them. Now they're going to speak for integrity at Washington, D.C. When did they have class there? No, never. They came through both schools. Fools. Make them speak about my behavior. Watch what happens. There's a difference about using emotions are about the simultaneous. See, they want to say, we have to check. Why you guys make it hard? Please. It is inseparable. You guys have employed the sense and sensibilities of the men and of the women that work for you guys, the network. Which one will do what's right first? Follow mandate law. I asked you guys through your Facebook pages. The Facebook pages have to be recorded. They're part of the federal crime. They have them involved with other natures of federal crimes. They are fronts that and when they're reading statutes saying, oh, well, they can't be sued, they're leaving out exception nature in the personal involvements and the physical delusions involvements too with the problems. Those physical delusions are being and haven't been propagated. they're relevant to where they've been replacing the short words obligated, especially those kids in New York City. Concentrated integrity. Instead, you guys have concentrated physical delusions, propagation, self-valued roles, uses of it off those locations that are factory miniature oriented uses of it, and collusion because there's remotely controlled use. It was a sophistication here since before our founding parents were born. No one saw it what it was doing. It's one way. In many pray. The phenomenon of the World Trade Center attack and of roles with it that were taken manifest left a trail of what is a phenomenon we could share means by to discern where and how remote possession of our countries individually grouped and together has made self-value, and that is used simultaneously, non-distinctly, and distinctly too, by a breaching method. Even if it is no longer being used, the way it's being used anyway, there's an extent it is being used. The causes of the sickly distinctly against, how it's sickly distinctly mostly Black people hurt by the people stacking and the simultaneous narratives of positive and negative treatments, blaming other things other than themselves, why there is fake science, speaking and having spoken for those locations, bodies, and nature properly. Why and how the nature's nature as their own and as its own, as the ground too, has been prevented. That nature of communication that evolves, evolutions, that brings, reveals evolution's fruits and gifts and means. One way redeems. So please, anyone, Drew Barrymore, can you hear me? Who else? Well, anyway, Wendy Williams show. I hope Wendy Williams, God bless you. I hope you get better, Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams, so Miss Queens, came from King of Queens, great sitcom. Big fan of yours. I wish you could help me. Any woman or any man too, be a man and tell me who disbelieves anything I say. Don't come on here and pretend to be, pretend you can speak for our nature and play a game. I'm talking about child abusers, proven, and that were forced. At the time, I was trying to tell on them, and they attached me to fake emails and pretended I was harassing someone, calling him back. He made all kinds of confessions, short words. See, I caught them, and then I had confirmed on Facebook a whole bunch of confessions and things that strangers made to me out of nowhere. Then I got them confirmed on Facebook because it had something to do with the Kevin Dillon and Anna Dillon, with various natures of federal crimes, with courts, judges, and police forms, uses of real estate crimes, uses of businesses criminally, regardless of the uses of boxing gyms, too, uses of the sense and sound disabilities of the people of the military, forced, tricked, or persuaded to roles with identity thefts and frauds instances, and remote uses of their fake motivations and sequence shifts associated with that, on off the state prison offices, as people on off the state judicial branch offices criminally involved. And so untimely deaths brought up the stuff at the principal child abusers campus and rolls with that, as people on off Trinity College rolls with that, and one recently reported too, even especially if those things were made up too, especially differentially too, which is also evidence. But on the campus near Trinity College of the kid, the other day died from fentanyl. There are proofs that he has nothing to do with drugs, probably, and that they killed him with it because they need to hide life progressions. For what I caught them doing on and off the location there, I've been telling you that for a while. You've been hiding this. They have a Dean Alford that a Joshua Stryker confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed, and people tied to him, involved with the FBI and various natures of federal criminals before they are caught, planting evidences together, identity thefts and frauds behind my back, so I don't have a means to counter it. And then demonstrating at a different time, like the next day, stand there. So in other words, most people are going to make a problem with people involved with child abuses like that. As simultaneously identity thefts fraud that don't even know us. See, this is where we have to get the rules of the foreign and domestic off the fake integrity at locations where they have investigators being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence at locations with crime scenes used criminally foreign influence originally still were employed. Although it knew those bad things were going to happen. They had those crazy breaching laws. Before they had them sustained, they had this method sustained against Native Americans. Now their syntax has to respond to it. Now they're losing their education, while they're having other replace the short words and revelations that would have been, should be, and could. Boxing, fake branches stood too long. Boxing is strong. Boxing's a song.